All right, it's the top of the hour. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all so much for joining us today. On behalf of AUVSI, I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Enabling Complex bvlos for Unmanned Infrastructure Inspection. So my name is Shannon Walker. I'm a Senior Program Manager for the Strategic Programs team here at AUVSI. And before we get started, we always have a couple of housekeeping items that we'd like to go over. So as always, all of the participant lines will remain muted throughout today's webinar. We are recording the program, and a viewing link will be emailed out to all attendees along with a copy of William's slide deck within the next week or so. You can now view all of our webinars on AUVSI's new learning and engagement platform, AVL. If you are listening to our broadcast today and you need any assistance, please send a note to the webinar leader using the chat at the bottom of your screen. So our speakers will be taking questions throughout the presentation today. So attendees, you are encouraged and welcome to submit those questions at any time throughout the webinar using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So please note, this is a different box than the chat. So just make sure to submit those content questions for our speakers using the Q&A, which can be found right next to the chat. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We'd like to welcome back and thanks Kongsberg Geospatial for their support of today's webinar. And we are very excited to have some excellent speakers with us today. Thomas Jimenez, Market Director of UAS at Kongsberg Geospatial, and William Wheeler, Director of Operations at Phoenix Air Unmanned, LLC. So Thomas manages all aspects of enterprise UAS activity at Kongsberg Geospatial. Primarily, he manages the IRIS terminal for both bvlos operations and airspace management. And Thomas has more than 1,000 hours of applied drone flight experience in utilities inspection, as well as exposure to many different client sectors from the utilities to oil and gas or mining in both the USA, Canada, and Latin America. Thomas is also a manned aircraft private pilot, certified both in the USA and in Canada. And William is the Director of Operations for Phoenix Air Unmanned, LLC, a sister company of the Part 135 air carrier Phoenix Air Group. And previously, interestingly enough, William was a remote control aerial cinematographer and has flown cameras for multiple major motion pictures and television series, including flying for Warner Brothers, Lionsgate, Universal, New Line Cinema, and Netflix. So William, I bet you have some really good stories you could share on that. But now William oversees bvlos flight operations focused on asset management in the utility sector. Phoenix Air Unmanned has inspected over 13,000 miles of power line infrastructure, utilizing multiple certificates of waivers and exemptions from the FAA. He holds an FAA private pilot rating and a level 2 safety certification from the Unmanned Safety Institute. So all that to say that we clearly have such unique and significant experience and knowledge leading us here in this presentation today. So without further ado, Thomas, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks a lot, Shannon, and thank you, William, for joining us on this webinar. We're really excited to talk a little more about IRIS Terminal and about how it's being used in the real world for utilities inspection and beyond visual line of sight. Starting briefly with me, Shannon's pretty much explained it all, but my primary role at Kongsberg Geospatial is working in the enterprise unmanned, enterprise UAS space. Primarily working on the IRIS family of products, which is what we're going to look at today. But before going into, well, the way we're going to do it, I'm going to look briefly, do an overview of Kongsberg as a family, as a company, and then boil down into Kongsberg Geospatial, a bit more about what Kongsberg Geospatial does, and then focus specifically on IRIS, the IRIS product of family of products. So starting briefly, Kongsberg is one of the largest companies a lot of people haven't heard of. We're headquartered, our parent company is headquartered in Kongsberg, Norway. The name of the town is Kongsberg too. It's a company that's over 200 years old, employs more than 11,000 people, and has a worldwide presence. We work in a lot of different spaces, marine, defense, aerospace, offshore oil and gas, renewables. And within the Kongsberg greater family, Kongsberg is subdivided into three subdivisions: Kongsberg Defense and Aerospace, Maritime, and Digital. And us, Kongsberg Geospatial, we fall on the left side of the screen here under Kongsberg Defense and Aerospace. So specifically Kongsberg Geospatial, and that's us. Our headquarters in Ottawa, Canada. The company is over 3 decades old. We employ 64 people, of which the majority of the people are in our Ottawa headquarters. I myself am in Florida, and we have other colleagues in Virginia and in Texas, but the majority of the team is in Ottawa, Canada. Our main, what we primarily build are situational awareness and geospatial visualization software solutions. So an idea of over the last 30 years, Kongsberg started as Gallium. It was a separate company back in 1992. In 2006, it was acquired by Kongsberg, Kongsberg Norway, that is, and then became Kongsberg Gallium, and in 2012 was rebranded Kongsberg Geospatial. I won't go through them, but here we've got a 30-year timeline of really important different projects that Kongsberg has worked on throughout its time. Some of them are specifically Iris, which we see here, but a lot of them are our primary product, which I'll move on to in a second. So the primary purpose and the primary role that Kongsberg Geospatial delivers is delivering geospatial visualization technology for defense systems. So a lot of these defense systems can be found inside defense equipment like APCs, Navy boats, submarines, and so on. And the main product or the main platform that Kongsberg sell is TerraLens. And TerraLens is a very highly performant mapping SDK, which is embedded inside a lot of these platforms. And a lot of our clients, a lot of the large names that you saw a couple of slides ago, use our platform so as to build their geospatial imaging solutions for use inside the relevant use case and application. So that's TerraLens, which is the primary product. Some places that you'd see TerraLens might be, for example, at the NATS traffic control in the UK or in Canada, the ground control station display for the Navy Triton, or and quite recently remote ATC towers for Avinor in Norway. Quick slide here of what that looks like. This was delivered in late 2020, and Kongsberg Norway delivered this, and Kongsberg Geospatial built a lot of the heads down display. Here we can see at 180 degree, pardon me, heads up display, which has an EO/IR camera, infrared cameras, PTZ cameras, and then the heads down display, which offers a lot of situational awareness of the surface surveillance on the airport. This also speaks to the fact that we've done a lot of work at design assurance levels as required by our clients. In this case, it was to Euro KED 153 standards, but we do a lot of design assurance work at Kongsberg Geospatial. So then boiling down, we've gone sort of Kongsberg parent, Kongsberg Geospatial, TerraLens, Iris, which is what we're going to discuss today. Iris was a software that we at Kongsberg Geospatial built. Originally, it was built as the NASAMS surface-to-air missile fire control system. That was then rebuilt and improved in 2015. And around 2017, it was repurposed for the use of unmanned aerial systems. So monitoring, controlling unmanned aerial systems. And that was Iris 1.0, which we can see here. Key differentiator when we see 1.0 and 2.0 is that 1.0 was in this portrait mode that we see here. And then 2.0 is now in landscape mode with, and instead of a touch screen, we've gone back to a traditional mouse click cursor approach. So now we've reached sort of the Iris family, which is what we're discussing and basically what my responsibility is at Kongsberg Geospatial. I'll touch on the family briefly, and then we'll move into terminal. So the bottom left here is terminal. We'll move into that in a bit more detail. On the top left GCS at Kongsberg Geospatial, where terminal is a little more of an off-the-shelf product. GCS is more of a consultative approach. We work with our clients and build custom ground control system softwares based on their needs. That might be, for example, package delivery, medical delivery. Anytime that clients need a custom ground control system built around their needs and around their hardware, it also incorporates all of the features that Terminal has. So it's a ground control system in that our clients can control their aircraft, but it also incorporates all of the airspace awareness and the sensor functionality that we have in Terminal. The counter UAS application is similar to Terminal, however, it's tailored towards the needs of counter UAS geographies and sensors, such as RF sensors, radar, and perhaps a little more of a centered or localized approach around the counter UAS needs of critical hardware. And lastly, UTM. UTM is it's a big subject, and there's a lot of players in it. What we represent under the sort of NASA FAA description, a portion of the USS. We are USS, so we can provide vehicle surveillance, airspace design, compliance monitoring, things like that as a USS for the broader UTM picture. But that's the big family, and I'm just going to focus on Terminal from here on in. So what is Iris Terminal? I'll briefly read this and then I'll unpack it. Iris Terminal is a complete airspace awareness platform allowing UAV operators to deconflict their airspace by visualizing every traffic output from their choice of sensors, inputs, feeds in one clean UI, and supporting the operator with services to aid their decisions. Unpacking that, the complete airspace awareness portion, in lieu of traditional bvlos, visual observers, or pilots with visual line of sight, Iris Terminal becomes the digital alternative to deconflicting the airspace. So where in the past, or not in the past, where in a bvlos circumstance you would have a visual observer deconflicting the airspace, Iris Terminal becomes your digital version of that. How? By combining a choice of sensors, which all of our clients choose their own sensors. We're completely hardware agnostic, but ultimately we visualize all of these sensors in one pane of glass, such that the airspace is completely visualized. Insisting there on their choice of sensors, inputs, and feeds. We are hardware agnostic. We do have a series of preferred hardware partners. However, we are a hardware agnostic platform, and so we work with all of our clients in catering or adapting the platform to their needs. And lastly, supporting the operator with services. We'll run through about 4 of those today, but inside our platform, we run our very own proprietary services, which are decision support tools, which aid the operator with a view to reducing the cognitive load on them and supporting their decisions in managing that airspace when they're conducting complex operations like the team at Phoenix Air Unmanned do. In a world where in order to get beyond visual line of sight waivers, a lot of the approach involves use of multiple sensors. We need to prove to the regulator that we have perhaps cooperative traffic with ADS-B visualized, non-cooperative traffic. That might be through radars, EOIR cameras. That might be through RID if we're looking into sort of unmanned. If every one of those sensors has its own display, rather than reducing the cognitive load on the operator, what we're doing is increasing it. Having 5 screens, 6 screens is useless. Having 5 feeds or 6 feeds on one screen, that becomes a lot more practical. And this is where Iris Terminal comes into play. We're trying to make sure that we can reduce that cognitive load by layering everything in one very clean UI. The basics of how Iris Terminal work, we work with static data train maps. So we've got a digital elevation data, traditional satellite maps, street maps, and so on. And we can also adjust those as clients require. And over that, we can overlay aeronautical data. At the moment, or shortly, we will be working closely with Aloft. So all of our airspaces will be brought in, both fixed airspaces like class airspaces, class B, C, D, so on, but also dynamic airspaces such as temporary flight restrictions or any other dynamic airspaces that open while someone is planning a mission or conducting a mission. We then overlay live data. Again, that could be ADS-B, radar tracks, whatever it may be. On that, we overlay our own aircraft. So importantly, our own singular or plural aircraft. And then we run services such as collision avoidance in order to support that operator in their decisions. So looking at a brief architecture diagram of how IRIS works, the main backbone of IRIS is a DDS or data distribution service. It's a publish subscribe middleware. That is our backbone, even though most people always see the front end, which is our screen, which is in the bottom right here, the two vertical screens. We do have this main backbone. Sometimes that lives on the same computer as the screen, or sometimes that can live on a server rack somewhere else. Then from there, we can pull in a number of, or all the different sensors, the ones we've described earlier, such as radar, our ADS-B, and so on. Similarly, all of our proprietary services push into the DDS, and we can also pull in one or many of our own ship telemetry services. And this all runs in this backbone. Similarly, in the UTM environment, we can use this via our API to push out that data, or not necessarily in the UTM environment, but we can also have an API feed so as to, people can pull that data out as required into their platforms. And lastly, we also have Iris Web Viewer, which isn't, it's in a beta stage at this stage, but it basically allows people who are out in the field or people who are accessing basically through a web browser, that may be on a laptop or a tablet, to see the same information that the folks, the main operating station can see, airspaces, aircraft, and even sending messages out or sending guidance of what's happening in the field to folks out in the, what's happening in the offices to folks out in the field. Earlier on, I briefly discussed some preferred partners. While we do work with any hardware vendor that's out there based on the client's needs, we also do work with some specific clients who basically we have very close working relationships with. Our commitment is we've already built those ingest APIs, so that they don't need to be built. We could deliver those in relatively short notice. They're also field tested in our Ottawa headquarters or Area XO, which is one of our sites where we do a lot of our testing. And there are ongoing support and updates. So as and when those hardware vendors provide support and updates, our clients are sure that they will enjoy those too, if they so choose. A couple of examples, 3 examples are Echodyne, whom we work with closely with their panels, with their DAA, at the moment largely with their Echo Guard platform, soon with other ones. The team at UAVionics we work with very closely. They are a lot of their hardware and their feeds. We're working at the moment on integrating one of their key feeds and work very closely with them. And the team at Elsight, who a lot of people know already. We can pull in a lot of beyond visual line of sight missions are going to require C2 links that can go the extra mile. And the team at Elsight are very easy to work with. We work with them on their Halo platform, and we use that for telemetry to be able to easily pull in telemetry on the terminal side, or also as a C2 link on the GCS side. So Iris's evolution pattern, it always has been, the idea has been to reduce that cognitive load on the operator. These operators, as Will well knows, your focus is the job at hand. In this case, it's likely inspecting utility towers, transmission towers, or rights of way, tower lean, conductor sag, whatever it may be. And that's the job at hand. So we need to try and provide them with that digital airspace visualization while reducing the cognitive load. You don't need loads of information. You just need the key information, and then providing them with those support tools so that when there is something that's important, it's at their fingertips and they're alerted to it. And some of those, I mentioned earlier, we'd run through some of those services. So I'm going to run through 4 of these services and explain a little more how they help teams like Phoenix Air Unmanned in getting that reduced cognitive load and then those support tools. So starting with our track correlation, as we mentioned, in order to satisfy that we are really visualizing 99.999 or whatever the requirement is of the airspace, it's not good enough just saying that we're seeing cooperative aircraft or non-cooperative, or using EOIR systems if we're flying at night, whatever it may be. So when a client builds a ConOps, a solution, it generally involves a number of different sensors. Every one of those sensors provides a track. There's no use, if we're in the business of trying to reduce people's cognitive load, that one Cessna flying through space provides 3 tracks because it's being picked up by 3 different sensors. Our iris correlator service understands that even though there are 3 tracks, it's the same aircraft, correlates them, and it provides 1 correlated track. We don't have a chance today to see a live demo. Whoever is in Vegas next week, we'd love to show you a live demo. But this is what it would look like on our track listings portion. Here we've got a Cessna November 48769er, and it's being picked up on ADS-B, but also on 2 different Echo Guards. We've pressed this collapse button, but basically that's collapsed normally, but we can see that even though it's the same aircraft, it's picked up on 3 different sensors. Our conflict warning service, similarly, it works with our correlated tracks and then our own ship telemetry. So if our aircraft is traveling through space, doing an inspection, the system is looking at all times at nearby aircraft, no matter what sensor it's being pulled in from. If one of those aircraft risks a conflict, it'll immediately alert the operator. That alert is both audible and visual, and it immediately, for example, if they're focusing on photography or building a LiDAR point cloud, it'll alert them immediately to look, and it'll give them very clear audible and visual signals of what the potential risk is. In the example that I've screen grabbed here, we've got our aircraft, which is S05 Zulu, and it's alerted us audibly, very annoying noise, and then visually that there is a Cessna, that same one, that Cessna 172, and we've got a horizontal separation, a vertical separation, and 35 seconds to our loss of separation. So this then allows the operator to act accordingly. Whatever's written in their ConOps, they can, if they think it is a true risk, they can hold in place, lower altitude, orbit, whatever it may be. But that information has been brought to their attention without the need of a visual observer. Our terrain warning is a service which basically acts to some capacity like in a cockpit, with a glass cockpit, like a synthetic ground. So if the user sets parameters for what their minimum altitude thresholds are, and the aircraft, when it's traveling through, will visually, as you can see in images here, it'll provide visual cues as to terrain that's nearby within the thresholds provided. And it'll also provide audible cues when you break a certain threshold. So if we're traveling through space, and this is obviously based on digital elevation data, as we approach or break those thresholds, the user, the pilot, the airspace manager is warned that they are within thresholds. And lastly, our geofence alerts. So inside Iris Terminal, we build, pilots, airspace managers, the operators build both geo barriers and geofences. Geo barriers pertain to alerting barriers for if my aircraft leaves a specific geofence, and the geofences are if any third-party aircraft enter my space. So an example here is, this is in Denver, I believe. Our red square we can see in 3 dimensions on the left and 2 dimensions on the right. Our red square is our geo barrier. It follows the railway there. And so the user here has set a certain altitude and a certain width and length. If our own ship exits this for any reason, the user will get alerted. Similarly, there's a far bigger, taller, green geofence, and it'll alert us if any aircraft come into this geofence. The idea with this, as I've discussed in the past, is that we're always trying to reduce that cognitive load. There's thousands of planes taking off, landing, flying at 35,000 feet, your United Airlines, some helicopter, which aren't relevant to the job at hand. What this team want to know is if there are any aircraft which are important to their, or are a risk to their operation. So by building these geofence alerts, we get alerted when it's important, not when the other 1,000 flights are in the area. And here we see an example of how different geo barrier rules can be set, whether it's our own ship, whether they're third-party contacts, and so on. So those four services that I mentioned applied directly to the utility inspection space. Track correlation, for example, is relevant when William and his team are flying the aircraft across all throughout the transmission lines. There's a lot of tracks being generated, whether it's our own ship, the same own ship being populated by a radar if we're using that. Similarly with third-party aircraft, that track correlation provides them with one single point for each different aircraft. Conflict prediction, the same reasons. When they're flying over a ridge or whatever it may be, and they can't see their aircraft, they will get that conflict notice and that conflict warning so that they can act accordingly. Terrain warning is quite straightforward. I live in Florida, there's less terrain here, but anyway, it's a little more mountainous. That's a lot more important to the operators so that they can have that alerting if their aircraft comes too close to the ground. And then similarly, again, those smart corridors or airspaces, if we use, for example, geo-boundaries, we can also fix several geo-boundaries. There might be an outer geo-boundary and an inner geo-boundary might be, for example, the parameters that are set out in a masking or a shielding ConOps. That way we know that if at any point the aircraft exits our shielding, whether that was 100 feet right or left, whatever it may be defined in the ConOps, the operator will be warned if we're outside of our shielding zone. And lastly, and I'll soon pass on to William, I just wanted to run through a little bit of why beyond visual line of sight makes sense in linear inspection. Just two very, very simplified diagrams here. Traditional bvlos infrastructure inspection basically normally involves, for example, a team in a truck. They can only operate as far as the eye can see, which might be, for example, don't hold me to this because it depends on the aircraft, it depends on lighting, landscape, and so on. They might see only 800 meters in one direction. That gives them about, say, a 1.6 kilometer inspection leg. If we go to beyond visual line of sight, the distance of that is defined again by landscape and so on, and also by whatever DAA sensors, if DAA is part of your ConOps. But now one inspection leg, instead of being 1.6 kilometers, it's 4 kilometers. Now, why is that an advantage? Why are asset inspectors wanting to gain that extra distance? As I mentioned, we get longer legs out of each single takeoff and landing. Why is that a benefit? When I did a lot of my inspections, takeoff and landings, for one, increase your personnel risk. Every time you pack all your equipment up, throw it in the back of your pickup truck, drive to the next location, you've got added risks. You're driving down rights of way, you're driving through risky terrain, you're sometimes driving through angry people's property with angry dogs, whatever it may be. Less TOLs mean reduced personnel risk. They also mean that from one single takeoff location, there's more flying. You're spending more time flying, you're spending more time inspecting because you're relocating crews less. Just recently, I was speaking to someone who manages a very large team, and then they rightly pointed out that the constraint then becomes UAS range, for example. Batteries, how far is my battery going to take me? But he mentioned, he said, I don't care. He said, I'll buy more batteries. There's a lot more value in me buying, it's a lot easier for me to buy batteries and keep the team in one spot to fly more distance than there is in constantly relocating them with batteries charging. So ultimately, what less takeoff locations lead to is a decreased cost per asset. A lot of the operators have basically maxed out how much they can bring their cost per asset down. Beyond visual line of sight, when you unlock beyond visual line of sight, you can unlock that decreased cost per asset. And that's all I wanted to present from here. I did want to mention, which I mentioned earlier briefly, I will be with my team in commercial UAV, booth 446, and we would love to have everyone come and visit, come and see the platform. It's not the same when you're seeing screen grabs. It's a lot better when you see the platform in action with real traffic, with real alerts. And we would love to have everyone pop by the booth. Please do. Also reach out to me on LinkedIn, Thomas Jimenez. You can find me on LinkedIn. We can schedule an appointment, but we really want to show people the platform and all the benefits that it gets. I also wanted to, before I hand over to William, congratulate them. A lot of people have probably seen in the news last week Phoenix were awarded a very impressive first of a kind authorization by the FAA. I'm sure William will touch on that, but I just wanted to congratulate them publicly. We're very happy to be a tiny portion of that. I know that a lot of work has gone in from a lot of people. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Will.
Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate that. And thank you to Kongsberg Geospatial and AUVSI for hosting us today and the opportunity to talk about bvlos for critical infrastructure inspections. I'm Will Wheeler. I'm Director of Operations for Phoenix Air Unmanned. I'm hopeful that my screen is showing. Thomas, can you give me a affirmative that you see my screen there? All right, thank you, sir. Director of Operations for Phoenix Air Unmanned. We are a UAS service provider, as Thomas expressed, really focused on critical infrastructure inspection, long, linear, complex operations, flying beyond visual line of sight under FAA regulations. As Shannon mentioned at the top of the presentation, our sister company is Phoenix Air Group, so it's very much a heavy tie to aviation. We have an aviation background. The company was founded, Phoenix Air Group was founded in the 1970s out of Atlanta, Georgia. Part 135 certificated operator, flying Embraers, Gulfstreams, Learjets all over the world. It's high priority cargo transport to include medical as well. Phoenix claim to fame recently is in 2014. They were responsible for the transport of U.S. citizens who were infected with Ebola back from Africa to the United States. The media stops reporting after about the third or fourth transport, but I think in total, Phoenix did about 45 transports back to the United States. So very much aviation focused here. And our company, Phoenix Air Unmanned, was founded in 2014 as the sister company and unmanned aircraft arm to Phoenix Air Group. We're privately held. We were founded in the Section 333 exemption days, where the FAA had not necessarily a requirement, but a lot of applicants were getting through having had pilots licenses as operators, manned pilots licenses. We migrated over to Part 107 when that rulemaking came out and came into effect. And then, as Thomas alluded to, and I'll speak to here later in my presentation, now operating under Part 91 rules, over 55 pounds. Very much focused on high resolution imagery and LiDAR data capture for long linear infrastructure inspections. We work with utilities, survey and engineering firms, and oil and gas. And then this is going to be a theme of my presentation, but we're very much tied to the operating culture of manned aviation arms, similar to our parent company. So we have the organizational structure of a 135 certificated company to include operations, safety, maintenance, quality assurance, dispatch, and training and standardization as well. Certifications and registrations are very important to us as an operator. We want to be stewards of the airspace. We want to adopt best practices, and we want to go beyond, what is regulatorily required. We want to go beyond laws and embrace our own standards to just give it the extra level of safety. We work with IBAC, the International Business Aviation Council, to become the first ISBAO registered operator for remotely piloted systems. IBAC has the International Standards for Business Aircraft Operators standards for remotely piloted aircraft systems, and this is something that we've embraced and utilized internally for our operations. We've held the Argus Platinum rating since 2018. Where all of our pilots, everyone here is Unmanned Safety Institute Level 2 certificated. And then we adopt NIST standards for proficiency testing and training methods for all of our pilots as well. Thomas had mentioned in his presentation the kind of why bvlos matters, and this is my slide regarding that. It's a real world scenario. In 2015, we were invited by Xcel Energy to operate a 5-mile stretch of transmission line in North Dakota. This was under a 333 exemption, so we weren't even there yet with Part 107, but visual line of sight flight rules had to keep the aircraft close. Like I said, 5 miles of imaging. They wanted 360-degree orbits of the structure, and then they wanted a nadir-facing shot as well. That 5 miles took us, with one aircraft and a single camera and a flight crew of 3, 2.5 flight days to go 5 miles. That was our eye-opening moment there as to why bvlos was necessary to scale an operation in the unmanned industry. So we went back to the drawing board, very much focused on how can we achieve more. Technology was there at the time to go farther. Cameras were there at the time to go farther, but limitations were very much around the regulatory environment, as we all know. So